All right, hello. So we are going to be working through the cart tracker OOP problem from the Spring 22 CS88 midterm. Okay, cool. So let's start by reading the problem description. We are the owner of several smart grocery stores. In order to model the supply of your shopping carts, complete the class cart tracker, which allows you to keep track of a line of shopping carts at different stores. And it tells us here that a cart is represented as a cart object. Okay, cool. Well, the first thing, let's take a look at the cart class definition. This is given to us in full. So let's take a look. First thing you notice is we see a class variable here called counter. And counter is taking on the default value 0. So let's go ahead and let's keep track of that counter variable. It's going to start at 0. Cool. And then we also notice a constructor function here, right? And this is going to be taking in a store. And we have two instance variables. We have one instance variable store, and that's just going to be equal to the store that was passed into the function. And the other one, ID, is actually set to whatever the cart counter class variable is set to at the time of the calling of this function. Notice we don't pass in a value into the constructor to set it to. We set it from the cart's class variable. And then we also notice that we are going to be enumerating that counter after every cart we make. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at part A. First, complete the init method. So the method that constructs our cart tracker objects, right? So this is going to take in an integer num carts and assigns the instance attribute carts to a list of cart objects of length num carts. And this is going to act as our line of shopping carts. So the ID attributes of the cart objects in the list should be increasing from left to right. For example, if num carts is 3, then the list might look like this. So we have 3 cart objects here with their IDs being 0, 1, and 2. Okay, so a few things here. Remember that we can't actually set the ID of a cart manually. It is just based on whatever the cart class definition is. Okay, and we are making 3 new cart objects. Because this list is made up of 3 cart objects, we have to make those carts, right? Using our cart definition, because there's nowhere else for those carts to come from. So if we go back to the doc test for cart tracker, notice here that we're making Joe's store cart tracker, right? Joe's store is equal to a cart tracker, and the num carts it passes in is 3. Okay, so what this is going to actually do is make 3 carts and set the .carts instance attribute for Joe's store equal to a list of all of those carts. So after this call, the carts list corresponding with Joe's store is going to look something like this. Cart 0, cart 1, cart 1, and cart 2. And our counter variable is going to be equal to 3, right? Because the first time it's called, we set the ID equal to cart.counter, which was 0. Let's restart. We set it to equal to 0, and then we add it by 1. Then we set the next cart equal to 1, and then we add it by 1. Then we set the next cart equal to 2, and then we add it by 1, right? So now we have this list of carts. And notice when we call checkout cart, what that function is going to do is pull out the cart at the end of the line. If you remember in here, it told us that the rightmost element, cart 2, is the cart at the front of the line, right? So that's really important to keep in mind. So since checkout cart is grabbing the rightmost element, that means Sally is going to be corresponding with the ID with 2. And Beth is the immediate call right after that, and that's going to be corresponding with the ID of 1. And we see that when we print both of their IDs. Awesome. So how do we go about doing this problem? So we have our constructor, we're given num carts, and we're given store. Well, right away we know that the store that's passed in is going to be the same store that's the instance variable for the cart tracker objects. So we can just set self.store equal to store, get those free points. Cool. But now we have a little more of a tricky part. How do we do self.carts? Well, remember, we have to make 3 new cart objects, right? And we only have 1 line to do it. So one thing that's sticking out to me is to maybe use a list comprehension. So how can we go about doing that? Well, we know we need our brackets, and we need to come up with our expression for the list comprehension. So what's that going to be? Well, that can actually be a call to make a new cart object. So let's remind ourselves, what does a cart object need to be made? It just needs the name of the store. Cool, and that's something that we actually have within the frame of this function. So what we can do is say, hey, we want to make a cart with the store name equal to store, and we want to do this num carts amount of times. How can we do that in the list comprehension? Well, we can use a for loop. We could say for I in range, it's going to get a bit too big, so I'll give myself some more room. I in range num carts, right? And what this is going to do is this is going to spit out a list of num carts cart objects, and it's going to be making those because this expression is going to run for every iteration of this loop. Notice here that this I is actually kind of meaningless. We don't actually care about what number we are counting up from 0 to num carts. All we care about is that we're executing this code that amount of times and having that many entries in our carts list. All right, cool. Next up, what do we got next? So it seems like we want to complete the following 2 methods so customers can check out and put back shopping carts. Okay, first up we have checkout cart. So this is going to return -1 if there are no carts available and otherwise removes the cart object at the front of the line and returns it. Okay, cool. So let's think about this. We're doing checkout cart first. So we're going to return -1 if there are no carts available. Well, how do we know there's no carts available? Well, remember that cart tracker objects have a carts instance variable. And that cart instance variable tells us is basically our line of shopping carts, right? So we know that, hey, if that line of shopping carts is empty, if there's no carts in that line of shopping carts, that means that there's no carts available, right? So what we can do is we can say, hey, if the length of self.carts is equal to 0, then that means we have no available carts. So we're going to return -1, just as it says here. Otherwise, we're going to remove the cart object at the front of the line and return it. Okay, well, what is the front of the line? Well, if you remember at this last part of part A, the rightmost element is the cart at the front of the line, right? I should finish highlighting that. So what we need to do is we need to not only remove the cart from the rightmost element, we also, from the rightmost element of the carts list, we also need to return that item. Lucky for us, there's a function in Python called pop that does just that for us, where it's going to remove the rightmost element from a list and return it as well. So we can go ahead and do that. We could say self.carts.pop. And that'll go ahead and pop off. If this was our carts list, for example, it would remove cart 2, and it would actually return cart 2 as well, giving us the value at that spot. Cool. Okay. Oops, sorry, I scrolled too far. Okay, that's it for checkout cart. Now, how about add cart? What is that doing? Well, notice add cart is actually taking in a cart. So it's going to take in a cart object called cart and place it at the front of the shopping cart line, the right end of the list. Okay, so we know we're also going to be modifying the carts list in this problem, right? And we know that because we're modifying the line of shopping carts. So how do we add something to the rightmost element of a list? Well, that's where the append method can come in, right? Append is just going to take in some value and stick it on at the rightmost end of a list. So we can take advantage of this here. Self.carts.append, and we can just pass right through the cart object. So now we've effectively added it to the front of our shopping shopping cart line because we're adding it as the rightmost element of the carts list. Awesome. Okay, last question. Complete the class transfer carts. And this is going to take in two cart tracker objects representing different stores, tracker 1 and tracker 2, and an integer n. So this function is going to remove n carts from tracker 1 by checking them out and adds them to tracker 2 in the same order that they were checked out. In the same order that they were checked out. Each transferred cart object's store attribute should be updated since the cart now belongs to a new store. Okay, so this is a lot. So let's go over it one more time. We're given a tracker 1 and a tracker 2 and an n. The idea is both tracker 1 and tracker 2 are cart tracker objects, right? The same part of the class that we've been writing throughout this problem. So the idea here is we want to remove n amount of carts from tracker 1 and put them into the line at tracker 2 while also updating those carts' store instance variable to update to be matching the cart trackers, the new carts tracker object it's going to, aka the new store it's going to. Because if you remember, not only did cart tracker objects have a store instance variable, but also the carts themselves had a store instance variable. Right there. Okay, well let's take a look at the skeleton to maybe get an idea. So it seems like we have a for loop. That's very good to know because we're dealing with n carts, so we have an undefined amount. It's going to be some n times amount that we're going to be doing this process. We have current cart, and it seems like we're updating the current cart store. Okay, well let's start with the loop. For I in range what? Well, since we want to remove n carts and add those carts back to tracker 1, it seems natural that we're going to be running this code n times. Okay, cool. Now we want to get the current cart. So remember, current cart is basically the current cart that we're at from tracker 1, because this is going to be removing carts off the rightmost end of tracker 1 and adding them to tracker 2. So how can we get the cart at the front of tracker 1's shopping cart line? And at the same time, we also need to remove that shopping cart from the line. How can we go about doing that? Well, lucky for us, we just wrote a function that does exactly that, right? It's going to, if it can, get the shopping cart at the front of the shopping cart line, remove it from the front of the line, and return it to us. So let's take advantage of that method we just wrote. Tracker1.checkoutCart. Oops, checkoutCart. Cool. So now we know we've removed cart from tracker 1, right? What's the other thing we have to do? Well, we have to update the store of the cart, and we have to add it back, or add it to tracker 2. So we've done step 1, right? We've removed the cart from tracker 1, and we have that cart. So how can we go ahead and update that store, the store value associated with that cart? Well, the skeleton gives us a bit of a hint, right? cur_cart.store. So this is going to be overriding the store value. So what's the store value we want to set it to? Well, we want to set it to the store's name that corresponds with tracker 2. And if you remember, cart tracker objects have their own store instance variable. So we can take advantage of that. We can say, hey, this current cart store that we want to move from tracker 1 to tracker 2, that store value should now match tracker 2's store value. So we can just simply write tracker2.store. Awesome. Okay, there's one more line here. What do we have to do? Well, we have yet to add it to the shopping cart line of tracker 2. How can we do that? Well, lucky for us, we've done a method to do just that in the previous problem, right? Add cart. Sorry. Takes in a cart object called cart, and it's going to place it at the front of the shopping line. Perfect, right? So we can use that. So we can just simply make a function call that says tracker2 dot add cart. And what do we pass through? Well, we're passing in the current cart, the one that we took away from tracker 1 and that we changed the store for. And that marks off the third thing we had to do for this problem. And we're all done. Hope that was helpful.